Howdy, y'all. It's time for another episode of Gong Fu Tea chA, brought to you here at beautiful Guanyin Tea House in Austin, Texas. And speaking of Guanyin, today we are going to be making Anxi Oolongs, which are oolong teas from the Anxi region of Fujian. Now, this is a county-ish district in the southern part of Fujian in the southeast of China. And it's home to some of the most famous oolongs in the world, specifically Tieguanyin, Iron Guanyin, sometimes called Iron Goddess of Mercy. And I'd say about 60% of the time when someone messages me and they're like, hey Sohan, my friend from China gave me this tea and I don't know what it is, can you read it for me? It ends up being a little packet that looks like this, because this is the most popular gift right now in China, tea-wise. When people give each other tea, they tend to give each other little packets of this, and they're usually Tieguanyin. That's what this says here, Tieguanyin. And why does it come like this? Because Tieguanyin is a tightly rolled oolong and can be vacuum sealed like this without crushing the leaves. If you tried to do this to, for example, a phoenix oolong, all those delicate little long dragony leaves would get crushed, which would be no good. But Tieguanyin is a very tightly rolled oolong, and because of that, you can vacuum seal it. And this is usually, what's in these little packets is usually a low oxidation Tieguanyin. So they keep them sealed in these little packets because the tea will oxidize when exposed to air. And so they vacuum seal them, little single serving. This is 6 grams in here. And then you just open it up and pop it in your vessel and you're ready to rock. So again, these are very, very popular gifts in China. And if you ever get a little packet like that, is it any good? I don't know. There's good ones and there's bad ones. I will say that the style of oolong that's produced in Anxi is very distinctive on the mainland. It's different than the other 2 primary styles of oolong produced on the mainland, which are the wuyi and the phoenix oolongs, which we've already talked about in other episodes. And you can see here that Tieguanyin is a rolled oolong. These little leaves are actually these little nuggets are actually little leaves. Each one of these is a little leaf, and it'll unfurl as we steep it. And this is that low oxidation Tieguanyin I was talking about. This has become very popular recently, but originally this was the classic style. This is a special grade of charcoal roasted, traditional charcoal roasted Tieguanyin called Longtou Fengwei Tieguanyin. And Tieguanyin is very special to me and to this tea house because this is Guanyin Tea House. And just a real quick story about Tieguanyin, the story of Tieguanyin and where it comes from and why it's called that. Guanyin is a bodhisattva, which is a Buddhist deity, well, not a deity, but a being who has achieved enlightenment and who chooses to forego nirvana and to stay in samsara, the cycle of death and rebirth, in order to help mortals be free from suffering. So this is her, Guanyin. She's the patron of this tea house. Love her. And so the story goes that Guanyin, who is the bodhisattva of compassion, is worshipped all throughout China. She's probably the most venerated of the Chinese divine beings. And so the story goes that one day a poor tea farmer was walking around, or actually he's not even a tea farmer. There's many versions of this story. Here's the version that I know. A poor farmer was walking around his land in Anxi County, among the hills that make up Anxi County and mountains, and he discovered on the edge of his plot, his farm plot, a derelict little shrine dedicated to the Bodhisattva Guanyin. And it was covered with weeds and falling down and everything. And the farmer saw this shrine and he pulled up all the weeds and he cleaned up the shrine and he dusted off the statue of Guanyin, and it was an iron statue, so he sanded the rust off of it and oiled it so it wouldn't rust. And then every day he would come back and make offerings to the Bodhisattva of rice and incense. And after a year of doing this, the Bodhisattva Guanyin appeared to him in a dream and said, "To thank you for taking care of my likeness, I have prepared a gift for you, and it's located in a cave behind the shrine. And it's a gift for you that you must share with your neighbors." And so the next day, he went to the shrine and he looked in the cave behind it, and right in the mouth of the cave was a tiny, scraggly little tea plant clinging to life, covered in weeds and cobwebs and you know, just like behind a pile of dirt or something. So he cleared out the weeds and he came back every day and watered the little plant, and pretty soon it grew into a robust, stout tea plant with big, broad, heavily serrated leaves. And that was Tieguanyin, and he named it Tieguanyin after the Bodhisattva who left it for him. And true to his word, he made clones of this one variety this one cultivar, he made clones of this, and that became the Tieguanyin varietal, and he disseminated them to his neighbors. And so this variety of tea is now spread all across China and Taiwan. They grow this all over the place, not just in Fujian, but Fujian, Anxi in Fujian is the only true home of real Tieguanyin. And so, and then further extra part of the story that I've heard recently is that while he was roasting the tea, he was a farmer, but not a tea farmer. He wasn't necessarily good at roasting the tea. So he was doing this roasting process, the tanbei roasting process, and he was distracted while he was doing it by a deer, which is one of Guanyin's animals. And so he saw this deer, and he was distracted in the roasting process by this divine deer, and he over-roasted the tea. But the tea is strong and resilient because it has those big, thick leaves, and it actually took really well to this dark roast. And so that is what gives us our traditional style of Tieguanyin processing, this black, dark, roasted oolong that you see here. And then this is what people, when people said Tieguanyin, until pretty recently, when people said Tieguanyin, they always meant something like this. And you can see this one has also been hand processed, and you can see you get a nice little taily tail on that bad boy. It's not just a little nugget, it's got a little tail. That's why they call it Longtou Fengwei Tieguanyin. Dragon head, phoenix tail Tieguanyin, special one. Excited to drink this one today. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the lower oxidation Tieguanyin, and this one has been machine processed in Longmen village, which is in the southern part of Anxi. And it's funny, it's a funny story. So Tieguanyin, it's so famous. It's extremely famous, and when I first started the tea spot a couple years ago, people would come, and anyone who knew anything about Chinese tea would say, oh, do you have any Iron Goddess of Mercy, any Tieguanyin? And I'd be like, no, I don't have any. Why didn't I have any? Because I hadn't found one yet that I liked. And so there was this conspicuous absence, conspicuous gap in my catalog that I didn't have any Tieguanyin, even though it's so famous, it's most famous of teas. And so there we go, get this guy wet. There we go. And so I determined that I was gonna go to China, and I was gonna go to Anxi, and I was gonna figure out the deal. I was gonna get the real good Tieguanyin. And I was like, well, I've never been to Fujian. That's why I don't have Tieguanyin, because that's my deal, is I don't want to carry anything that I didn't source. So I was like, okay, and I met this person in the tea spot who their uncle was a bigwig at the Anxi Tieguanyin Jituan, which is the big factory that produces Tieguanyin in Anxi. That's like one of the big national factories in China that produce tea. And so I was like, okay, cool, I've got the in. I know a guy who works at the place. I'm gonna go find the Tieguanyin when I get there. So I traveled there with Mary Cotterman, and we were like, okay, we're gonna hunt down Tieguanyin. We met this guy picked us up in a Lexus SUV and took us to a fancy lunch and was talking about how great their tea was and how rich his boss was. And then he took us to the factory, and they had this like really, really kind of lame museum situation going on that was like all this, the art was nice, but he kept talking about how much every piece cost. He'd be like, and this piece cost this much. And anyways, it was fine. He was a great host, lovely guy. None of the tea that we tried at that factory, and there was dudes in lab coats with clipboards all over the place, and they had a mass spectrometer, and they had like gas chromatography and all this stuff, and they had these machines, like huge, never like nothing I've ever seen in my life. Way too. No one was eating lunch, no one was taking a nap. Did not seem like China at all. And so he guided us through this factory, and he's like, and this is all this stuff, and so I was like, okay, let's drink some tea, and we tried it, and they had like 5 different kinds of Tieguanyin that were all picked at different times of day, and they had little bowls and little spoons, and they're using the spoons to like show the color of the tea, to like ladle the tea out and the different color of them, all of them, and it was so precise, and this beautiful hallway with this huge tea table, and nothing was good. Not one of those teas was any good. In fact, they were all super gross, and I was like, ooh, okay, this is awkward. And then I was like, and so I asked him, I was like, okay, well, so here's the thing. I usually get tea from farmers. Like, that's my deal. Do you know any farmers who have tea? And he's like, you don't want to do that. Because here we have 3,000 employees, and a little farm family only has like 6 or 7 people, processing the tea. And if you get some tea from them and you like it and you come back and you want to buy a ton of it, they don't have a ton, and then you won't be able to sell it anymore. But we have 10 tons. If you want 10 tons of tea, we got 10 tons for you, no problem. And he's like, and if farmers, you get tea from farmers, you buy it 1 year and it's good, and you come back the next year and it tastes different. Our tea tastes the same every year because we have our professional blenders blending all the Tieguanyin from all the different farms together to achieve a consistent flavor year after year. And I was like, wow, this is not what I'm trying to do. And then he took us into the Anxi city tea market, which is, honestly, is like one of the worst places I've ever been in my entire life to find tea. And he was trying, like he wasn't just like completely dedicated to us buying tea from his company. He introduced us to his cousin and to a bunch of other people that he knew who were tea farmers, and none of them had good tea. All of them had bad tea. It was all nasty. We went to the Anxi tea market. It was just like, just Tieguanyin bonanza. It was like a bajillion types of Tieguanyin. And it was all bad. I literally got sick. Also, I was underdressed, it was cold. But the tea was not helping because it was really nasty tea, and I could taste the pesticides and the gnarliness of this tea. And if you've ever gone to a Chinese tea market, then you probably know what I mean. And if you haven't, watch your back when you're at a Chinese tea market. You might get poisoned. For real though, you get some really gnarly. The gnarliest tea in the world can be found at a Chinese tea market. So there we go. Here's some Tieguanyin, that nice beautiful color. I'm gonna go ahead and do another steeping in here so that we have a nice fat Gong Bay to check it out in. As far as technique, this water is probably at about 180. I like to use water at about 180. This is my cooler kettle for this, and I just go in a nice little circle like that. Yeah, just a happy little circle. Boom. And then later on, sometimes I'll pull up and do like a strong pour when it, the thing with this tea is it expands a lot, and you can't really move the leaves once they're open. You can move the water around the leaves. And then get them now so it drops out. It's a very diffuse tea when it's steeped, but it's a very dense tea when it's dry. And so I'm gonna just go ahead and show y'all how much this tea is expanding, and it's gonna continue to expand until it's pretty much filling up the gaiwan entirely. And that's just that little 6-gram packet. And so, ooh, yeah, okay, sweet. And I'll go ahead and pour this one into here so we can see the color. There. And I'll put this guy here. It's a good spot, right? Yeah. Ooh, boy. And how does it smell? How does it taste? Honeysuckly is the main note that I get on these nice low-oxidation Tieguanyins. So anyway, I was sick. We didn't have any Tieguanyin. I was really annoyed because I came all the way to Anxi to look for it, and everything was super gnarly and gross. And I was like, Mary, we just got to get out of here. I give up. We're just going to go without Tieguanyin for another year. And then the nice lady who had kind of escorted us there, she was the sister-in-law of the guy who worked for the company. She was like, well, I'm going back to Xiamen today. I can give you a ride. And I was like, okay, sure, give us a ride back to Xiamen. And I was like utterly defeated. I was just feeling so defeated at this point. It was terrible because I was just gonna go get this Tieguanyin. I'm gonna go find it. Like I've been trying to find this for years, and I'm gonna get a really nice one. And so I was so disappointed leaving Anxi. And then I was like, are there hot springs? I'd like to go to some hot springs because I'm feeling sick and like sad, and I want to go recuperate in some hot springs. And she's like, yeah, because Fujian has hot springs. And so she's like, yeah, there's a little town called north of Xiamen, at the very bottom of Anxi County called Longmen, Dragon's Gate. And I'll take you there. The mayor of this town is an old friend of mine, and there's a lot of hot springs there, and you can go bathe in the hot springs. And so she took us to this town. Great noodles. They have a very distinctive style of noodle they do there. We got some noodles. She introduced us to the mayor of this town. It was an old classmate of hers. Tiny, tiny, tiny little town. And he got us into his favorite hot spring hotel, because foreigners aren't just allowed to stay wherever in China. You have to stay at special hotels that are allowed to host foreigners. But we knew the mayor, so he used his ID to get us into a little hot spring hotel there that normally foreigners wouldn't be allowed to stay at. And we go to, in this hotel, there was, a little old lady at the back serving tea, which is pretty much anywhere you go in Fujian. If there is any way that tea can be consumed in a given place, and there are people there in that place at the same time, then someone will be making tea in that spot. So that's like a business, a hotel, a home, a park, next to an alley or whatever, there's people drinking tea everywhere. So we go into this hotel, and there's this like 80-something-year-old lady who's like mostly deaf, and she was pouring tea back there, and she poured us some tea, and it was Tieguanyin. It was this Tieguanyin that we just served. It was this low-oxidation Tieguanyin, and I tried some. I was like, this is the best Tieguanyin I've ever had. This is the best green, low-oxidation Tieguanyin I've ever had. And this is after 4 days of trying to find this exact tea. And I was like, where did you get this? We've been looking for this tea for days. Where did you find this tea? And she's like, we make this in the basement. And I was like, what? She's like, yeah, me and my husband, we've been doing this for years. Like, we're friends. Because I asked our host when we were going to Longmen, I was like, how about Longmen? Does Longmen have tea? And she's like, no, it's too low elevation. They don't grow tea there. So when we were there, I was like, but I thought Longmen didn't grow tea. And she's like, we don't grow it. We just make it. We process it, because they're old. This is a couple, they're both in their 80s. They've lived there their whole lives. They're from Anxi. They know all these tea farmers in the mountains. And so they had this really good tea. And then I was like, I want to see. And they brought me down to the basement. And sure enough, they had all this tea processing equipment. It was a bunch of machines. So this is a machine processed tea, the one that we just made, which is typical of these low oxidation Tieguanyin. You don't often see them hand processed. It's a modern process, and it tends to be done with machines. And it doesn't mean there's no skill involved. These machines are operated by hand. They're not automatic. That means that they put charcoal in the machine, and then all of the calibrations, the setting of the settings, and some of the steps, like there's some jiggling that goes on, and there's some dial turning that goes on, and there's a bunch of stuff you still do by hand. But they had all these different machines for making this Tieguanyin, and I watched them make it. I took a video of it. It was really cool. Sweet little couple. And I'll tell you a little more about that story later, because there's more to it. But now we're going to make the dark Tieguanyin. This is the traditional charcoal roasted Tieguanyin, and this goes through a very crucial step, which is the tanbei step, charcoal roasting. And this is the essence of the skill of a tea master. An oolong tea master is to charcoal roast the tea. And Tieguanyin, this Tieguanyin gets roasted multiple days in a row by our man, Oolong, who makes a lot of our Phoenix oolongs as well. And we switch kettles here. Got a hotter kettle. Yeah. And there we go. Already got water in that guy. And so he makes Phoenix oolongs in general. And that's the thing, is I couldn't find any of this dark Tieguanyin in Anxi city, in like the city itself of Anxi. That's not to say it doesn't exist, but I didn't find any. All I saw was that green Tieguanyin, and none of it was good. And it was just Tieguanyin. They didn't have anything else going on really in the markets there. They had Tieguanyin picked at different times a day. For some reason, they're really into that whole thing. And they tasted different, but none of them were good. Anyway, so Oolong, our dude, a man in Chaozhou, makes mostly Phoenix oolongs, which is what's local to Chaozhou, but his great-granddad was a master at making Tieguanyin, and he still makes Tieguanyin. He makes it very, very well. He makes some of the best dark roasted Tieguanyin I've ever had. The only other Tieguanyin I've had that is dark roasted like that compares to Oolong's was made by a master chA in Taiwan, and he brought some Tieguanyin plants over. His family brought some Tieguanyin plants over in the 60s from Fujian to Taiwan, and has been growing and making charcoal roasted Tieguanyin up there for many years, many, many years. That guy's like 90, he's really old. But he also makes really amazing Tieguanyin. But Oolong is a consummate tea roaster, and he makes this beautiful Tieguanyin. As for this dark Tieguanyin, I'm using my Heart Sutra pot. This is for dark oolongs. It takes a second to get going, and I'm actually I know that this is gonna make a boiling noise, but that's just the thing about making tea. Sometimes you gotta reboil water. So I'm just gonna get this water nice and hot so that we can get a good hot pour on this, because the more fire a tea has in it, in general, the more fire you need to use to get it awake. So the more roasting and the oxidation the tea's undergone, the tendency is to use hotter water. And this reminds me of when I was little, there was this fancy hardware store that my mom would take me to, and they had a parrot, and they had candy, and they had like really expensive hardware, and they had this whole aisle of coffee. And I used to love going to this hardware store, not only for the parrot and the candy, but also because they had this coffee aisle, and I used to love to walk down this coffee aisle. And they had a lot of those like flavored coffees, like hazelnut coffee, because this is back before they were into like all this shade-grown, fair trade, nice coffee. and then all these flavored coffees. And this tea reminds me of walking down that coffee aisle because you have that amazing roasted smell. And then you also have this like sweet, very sweet, like caramely, hazelnutty sort of thing going. It's not really like hazelnut. It's more like hazelnut coffee. I don't know if it makes sense at all. Yeah, but it's great. It's lovely. You can make the greener Tieguanyin with machines. It's really hard to get that charcoal roast process to be just right with the machine. There really is this extreme human element that's required to really get that roast perfect. And so roasting tea, the story goes, I'm told, by Oolong, that 2 different Anxi tea masters have sent their kids to him from Anxi to Chaozhou to learn this tanbei process from Oolong because he's so good at it, because it's been largely abandoned in Anxi. But neither of them completed the training. It takes a long time to build up the skill and also the calluses to do this because it's a very hot process. You're sticking your hands in these leaves and they're getting up to 100 degrees Celsius, the temperature of boiling water. And there's white charcoal underneath these leaves. The only thing between your hands and the charcoal is the bottom of the tray and the leaves themselves. And so it's a very difficult process, and you ruin a lot of tea in the process of trying to learn it. So it's a very expensive process to learn. And so he had 2 proteges from Anxi. Neither of them managed to complete the training. But he's got kids. He's teaching his kids, so we'll be fine. They're little. So hopefully he has a good long life and his kids learn really well so we don't have any gap in getting this wonderful tea. So my water is just about at temperature. I'm just gonna use boiling water on this. That's how I do with charcoal roasted Tieguanyin. And I'm gonna give it a nice long steep because these little rolled teas, especially when they're dark like this, they just take some more steeping. They take a little bit more love. I'm just gonna show just this guy down here. Give this guy a nice steep. I'm excited about this. I'm legitimately excited to drink this tea because he just started making this, the Longtou Fengwei. He's been making charcoal roasted Tieguanyin the whole time, and I love it. And then all of a sudden he's like, oh, now I've got this fancy one. And it's literally twice as expensive as regular Tieguanyin. And it turns out the main difference is that it's hand rolled. So the rolling, the shaping process that gets the tea into that little nugget shape is, even when his normal Tieguanyin that is hand roasted, all of his tea is hand roasted, but he has been buying, the rolling process, the shaping process happens before the roasting process. And so that part can be done by him or it can also be done by the farmer producing the tea. And so he's been getting a hand processed version of Tieguanyin and then roasting it. And so that's where we get this Longtou Fengwei Tieguanyin. And you would think the shaping process doesn't have much to do with the taste, but it really does. What I found is that even parts of the process that you don't think would matter if they were done by hand or by machine, you can always taste the difference. You can always tell if something's been done completely by hand. And these dark roasted Tieguanyins are becoming more and more rare in general. And so it's really exciting to be able to have a special high grade of this. This would be like what people were drinking, a long time ago. Pre-industrial China. Yeah. Oh boy. It's a beautiful color on that. And this tea is gonna keep getting darker. This tea will be like dark red by the time we are done steeping it. But for now, we're gonna move on. We're gonna make some other teas. Okay. Oh yeah, it's lovely seeing the color difference between the 2 Tieguanyin. So there you have the traditional charcoal roasted Tieguanyin and the modern green Tieguanyin, which has become very, very popular lately. And for a minute, I was kind of worried that charcoal roasted Tieguanyin was just going to go extinct because, as I said, that light roast, that light low-oxidation Tieguanyin has become so popular lately, and that seems to be all anyone wants because it's real flashy. It's got that honeysuckle fragrance, and because it's cheaper and easier to produce because you can do it successfully with machines. People are like, oh yeah, you like that? Okay, cool. Just make that now. But in the past couple times I've been to China, I've been seeing more and more traditional charcoal roasted Tieguanyin. I've been seeing non-charcoal roasted Tieguanyin being marketed as charcoal roasted Tieguanyin, so at least people are aware that charcoal roasted is better. And so we are seeing a resurgence in this style of Tieguanyin, the traditional style of Tieguanyin. And this is like classic Gong Fu Cha stuff going on, like making Tieguanyin in a little pot, like dark roasted Tieguanyin in a little pot. That is like OG Gong Fu Cha right there. In Chaozhou, they used to drink this like crazy. Now, because the quality of Tieguanyin has been going down in the past couple of years, they are drinking more Phoenix Oolongs. But in Chaozhou, which is Gong Fu Cha Central, they used to drink tons and tons of Tieguanyin. So Tieguanyin is not the only Anxi Oolong. There are other Anxi Oolongs. They're not as well known, but and actually there's probably I don't know how many varieties there are, but there's dozens at least, maybe hundreds of varieties of tea that are being grown in Anxi, and like the Wuyi Mountains, Anxi Oolongs also have 4 famous teas. In the Wuyi Mountains, it's the Big Red Robe and Golden Sea Turtle and Iron Art Hot and White Coxcomb, like we talked about before. In Anxi, there are 4 famous oolongs. Tieguanyin is the first of them, and the other ones are Banshan, which is root mountain. It's not a good, I don't know how to translate that. Ban is like the origin, the root. Riban is Japan, the origin of the sun. So Banshan, root mountain, and then Maoxie, hairy crab, which is one of my favorite tea names, and it's a fantastic tea. And then this one is golden turtle, Qingwei, which is not to be confused with Qingwei, which is golden sea turtle. This is Qingwei, golden turtle, yellow gold turtle. And this is, this along with hairy crab and root mountain make up the sezhong, the color types. And sezhong, color types, means all the famous Anxi Oolongs that are not Tieguanyin. And so you've got 4 Anxi Oolongs, you've got Tieguanyin, and the sezhong. It's like Alvin and the chipmunks, if there were 3 chipmunks. There's not. But, you know, same idea. You've got the famous one, and then the rest of them are kind of over here. And so this is one of those. This is the sezhong, the color types, and this is golden turtle. This is maybe my favorite one. This year is probably my favorite one. It is just out of the park this year. And I'll go ahead and make some of this in this nice little fishy guy want here. And that's another thing. When I was in the factory at the Anxi Tieguanyin Jituan, I asked about the color types. I was like, well, do you guys have any of these other ones? Do you have hairy crab? Do you have golden turtle? And they were like, no, nobody makes those anymore because Tieguanyin is the best. And that was like the final word. He's like, nope, we don't have those. And I was like, well, kind of working at them. He's like, nobody grows those anymore because Tieguanyin's the best. Why would we bother to grow other varieties of tea? Because this one's obviously #1. So that was kind of the attitude the whole time. It was really obnoxious. And like I said, nice guy, great host, totally on a different page than myself about tea in general. I'm gonna switch back to my cooler kettle because Banshan tends to like cooler water. Or not Banshan, Qingwei tends to like cooler water. And I'm gonna go ahead and pour this in here. There you go, Qingwei. And this is from the same place as makes the Tieguanyin. That's another thing. When I found this place, I was like, this is the best Tieguanyin I've ever had. This is the hotel, zooming back to Longmen and the Hot Springs Hotel. I asked them, I was like, wow, this is great. This is Tieguanyin is amazing. Do you make any other kinds of tea? And they're like, yeah, we make all the other sezhong. We make Banshan and Qingwei and Maoxie. And I was like, oh, great. So people do still grow them. And they're like, yeah, here's what happens. The people that we know who grow these teas up north in the mountains of Anxi, they grow all the different kinds, but they sell them to the factory, and the factory turns them all into Tieguanyin. So you see this again and again in China, is a famous tea just getting so hyped and blowed up that people are only concerned with getting that one type of tea, and so you're seeing all these heirloom varietals being kind of sacrificed to this more famous version. And the same thing happens with Big Red Robe, Da Hong Pao in China. Big Red Robe no longer has, Big Red Robe is the name of a varietal. But nowadays you can make a blend of different Wuyi Oolongs and call them Big Red Robe, as long as they taste like Big Red Robe. Then you can market them as Big Red Robe. And so this is a double shame because not only are you getting counterfeit Big Red Robe, you are also taking these other varietals and ignoring them. The same thing happens with Tieguanyin and Anxi. So people are still growing all these other varieties of Anxi Oolongs, but they just get processed and called Tieguanyin because that's what sells. That's what people are looking for. People don't come to Anxi looking for golden turtle and hairy crab and root mountain because, you know, they just don't know about them. They've heard, they're not super educated about tea. They've heard about Tieguanyin. They know, oh, Anxi, Tieguanyin. So I go to Anxi, I get Tieguanyin. So why bother going through the trouble of separating these other cultivars and processing them differently and then selling them? And people are like, oh, I don't know. I didn't come here for no turtle tea. I came here for Tieguanyin. So the art is being lost largely of how to process these other teas. But, oh yeah. This is exciting. I'm excited to try this and Tieguanyin side by side because it's been a long time. But same masters making these. This is the same as this green Tieguanyin that we started off with. And I'll do one more pow of this to give us an idea of what it looks like next to its sister tea, Tieguanyin. These are very forgiving teas in both their green and their oxidized form. All of these Anxi Oolongs are very slow to get bitter. It takes a lot of, you really have to try to make them bitter. All right, so I'm just gonna hold these guys up next to each other. And you can see, ooh, yeah, very similar color, very similar level of oxidation. But when you look at the leaves themselves, the leaves look different. The Tieguanyin is a little bit more oxidized. And the golden turtle has a more of like a yellow gold color. And actually we can do this. And let's see, it looks like the golden turtle's got bigger leaves also, bigger, fluffier leaves. Yeah, how's that? Getting real nerdy, looking at the different low oxidation Anxi Oolong side by side. This is what the show's about. Yeah, and then again, you know, one day we'll have smell-o-vision and you can really experience the difference. Whereas the Tieguanyin is super floral and honeysuckly, I'd say that this golden turtle has more of a, like, almost like a melony kind of smell to it. A little fruitier, a little bit fruitier of a smell. All right, and then we're gonna do a bonus tea. I'm not gonna do Banshan, and I'm not gonna do Root Mountain and Hairy Crab, because that'd be a lot of teas to make, and they're all gonna come out looking pretty much more or less the same. They taste different, they smell different, they're really nice, they're all gonna look pretty much the same on camera. And then I'm gonna go ahead and do a little bonus tea, which is not a rolled Anxi Oolong like we've been making. I got my special glass Gaiwan out for this. What we're gonna do is a Zhang Ping Shui Xian. This is a really nice tea. Zhang Ping is a little town just outside of Anxi County. And they have been making this style of oolong there for a long time. They say this is one of the most ancient styles of oolong production. And the people of Zhang Ping say that they were the ones who invented this low oxidation oolong processing, which they achieved by wrapping the tea in paper and then sticking into a wooden mold. It looks like a mortar and pestle, and they just put the tea down. There we go. Let's put it in here. Yeah. Yeah. And so they'll wrap the leaves in this paper, they'll stuff it into a little mortar and pestle and put the little pestle part down on top of it and let it sit there and let it dry. And so it oxidizes slowly, very, very slowly. And you can see that you get a mottled red-green appearance to the leaves here. And so that red color is the oxidation, and the green is the unoxidized tea. And so you get an uneven oxidation on this tea. I'll go ahead and get my thing ready to do the thing. And they would wrap these like this, and you could travel with them. You could have a little nugget of tea to bring with you. And it also is a preservation technique. I mean, tea that has been partially oxidized lasts longer than completely unoxidized green tea. And so they say that they are the innovators who created this low oxidation style of processing, and they very well may be. And they say that this is the ancestor of the Taiwanese tea known as baozhong. And actually, a lot of the Taiwanese teas, the Gaoshan oolongs, the high mountain oolongs, are processed like Tieguanyin. They use that processing style. Taiwan has all kinds of genetics from all over Fujian and some of their own native genetics, but they use a processing style borrowed from Anxi, the Tieguanyin processing style, where you get little rolled nuggets, oftentimes low oxidation. And then you also have baozhong, and they say that baozhong, which means the wrapped kind, is a descendant of this tea that is actually wrapped in paper, Zhang Ping Shui Xian. And the breed that's being used, Shui Xian, is a cosmopolitan oolong breed. You find it all over the place. You find Wuyi Shui Xian, where it originated in Wuyi, the Wuyi Mountains. And you also find Shui Xian in the Phoenix Mountains. So you get Shui Xian, water immortal, all over the place. In every place it's processed, they process it in their own unique style. And this is the style that they do in Zhangping. And I'm gonna go ahead and, this is gonna be fun. I got this glass sky one because it's gonna be fun to watch this tea kind of unfurl. It's real slow, slow like. I'm gonna dump this water. There we go. So I like to bring these with me. I like having these little packets and these little nuggets of tea because you have something to bring with you when you go somewhere, and you can just put it in a kettle and make it and have something really fancy to share with people. And I assume that when people were on the road traveling in ancient China, then this is not dissimilar to how they would take tea. In the West, they would have their little cakes of tea, you know, their bricks or beings of pu'er tea. And then in the East, you would have something like this, a little pillow of oolong, like Zhang Ping Shui Xian. And this tea, because it is pressed, and you know, oolong is not pressed with stones the way that we do with pu'er. You don't get a nice, like a tight pressed cake the way you do with pu'er. This is a very lightly pressed little pillow of tea, and it kind of comes apart in your hands. You can just snap it in half very easily. Let's see. That's its rinse. Let's give it a smell here. Very jasmine-y, very floral, a little bit of jasmine notes. I've had many invitations to visit Zhangping. I might go this year. Apparently there's a lot of Hakka people in that region. Fujian has a lot of different ethnic groups, and including the Hakka, who are not really a separate ethnic group, but they are like a subgroup of the Han. And apparently they're somewhat involved in the production of this tea. And the food's supposed to be very good. And apparently when they make this tea, they have kind of a little festival where everyone gets together and starts doing this thing with these making these little pillows of tea all at the same time, and it's kind of a neat, traditional, ritualistic thing. There we go. You can see it start to expand and unfurl. Whoa, yeah. All right. I've heard this process called the agony of the leaves, watching the leaves writhe in the hot water as they unfurl. And I don't usually use glass vessels because I don't like the way that they leach heat. This is dumping heat very quickly, but it's kind of neat to be able to see the process happening. So let this unfurl a little bit more, and then we'll go ahead and pour out this tea. And so this tea, not technically an Anxi Oolong, it is Anxi adjacent, but if you were going to put it into a category, it would be most like the other Anxi Oolongs, and maybe the progenitor of this low oxidation style that is popular in Taiwan and also has really started to dominate the Tieguanyin and Anxi Oolong market. And from these plants, you get a lot of the Taiwanese varietals like Jinshuan, golden lily, that gives us the milk oolong, the frostbitten milk oolong, also comes from this same lineage of tea plants. That's pretty cool. Yeah. And then you can really see the beautiful modeling on the leaves. When this is done, we'll pull out some of these leaves and look at them, and you can see, whereas the more refined rolled oolongs, the rolled Anxi oolongs, have a very uniform, a little bit more uniform oxidation. These are very kind of erratic. It's kind of the luck of the draw, how much oxygen there was accessing a given part of a given leaf. And from this medium oxidation, it's not as low oxidized as the golden turtle, maybe somewhere around where the Tieguanyin was, but you get this somewhat darker color. It's kind of in between. Oh yeah, it's actually right in between these. You've got the very light golden turtle, you've got the dark charcoal roasted Tieguanyin, and then you have the medium oxidized Zhang Ping Shui Xian. I'll go ahead and do another steeping of this. Oh, that's out of water. I got this one. Always keep 2 kettles at hand when you're filming a show. You don't want to run out of water. There we go. Isn't that that's a huge chunk of tea. Good thing I got this giant glass guy one for it. And now that it's open, I'm going to steep it a little faster. And I guess if we're going to do pouring tips for this tea, again, like the other oolongs in this show, the other Anxi oolongs, it's very forgiving. There's not nearly as much technique as there is with like the Phoenix oolongs or even the Wuyi oolongs. They're very chill, they're very nice. That might be one of the reasons that it is such a popular gift to give people. You can give someone one of these little packets and they can just do whatever with it. They can just put it in a mug and put hot water on it and it'll come out real good. And you'll get lots of steepings out of it. It'll be very fragrant and nice. So for that reason, it's become one of the most popular teas in China. Tieguanyin, the iron goddess of mercy, although not technically a goddess, a bodhisattva, but you know, whatever. Wow, that's a big guy one. I'm gonna go ahead and do like this, because I want to spill some water. There we go. And then put this down here. All right. There. Wow, that's beautiful. See, this is kind of like what they did when I was at the Anxi Tieguanyin G1, except they all look kind of the same color, and none of them were good. They all tasted really gnarly and bad. So let's see. I'm going to play with these a little bit more before we finish up. I'm going to go ahead and do the color compare with the Tieguanyin versus golden turtle. Pour a little bit of this off so that we have an even quantity. Is that closer? Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's good enough. And so we got different colors here, ever so slightly different. I'd say that the golden turtle presents as a little bit more golden, which makes sense. And then the Tieguanyin is a little bit greener. Although I believe the Tieguanyin is a little bit more oxidized than the golden turtle is. And then let's go ahead and just make a little rainbow here. Then we have the medium oxidized Zhang Ping Shui Xian. And then finally, the high oxidation charcoal roasted Tanbei Tieguanyin. There we go. Yeah. A little progression there of oxidation. So there we have it. We have the Anxi Oolongs, Tieguanyin on either end. Then we have golden turtle and Zhang Ping Shui Xian. And then the missing ones that we don't have here today are hairy crab and root mountain, and they would be similar to Tieguanyin and golden turtle. And depending on the oxidation, I've never seen them high oxidized. I'm sure they make them, I bet it'd be really good. But yeah, Tieguanyin, a very famous tea. If someone ever hands you a little packet of tea, there's a good chance it's going to be Tieguanyin, especially if it's rolled into little nuggets. When you're steeping them, I like to give them a little swirl at first, and then once the leaves are unfurled, you go in a little circle. And they're very forgiving, very chill teas, very fragrant, famous for their fragrance, and they share a name with our tea house, so we love them here. Thank you all for joining us on another episode of Gong Fu Tea Cha. Please subscribe if you enjoyed this show, check out our other episodes, and stay tuned for more wonderful tea knowledge. Thank you.